guys, it's Amber from Amber Reads Books, and I'm here today to bring you my weekly reads video. I have so many books to get through, so let's get started. So I'm going to show you my books from the lowest ranked to the highest ranked. And my lowest ranked book for this week was All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. I did not give this even a ratings on Goodreads. If I had to give it a personal rating, between you and I would give it a 1 star, but because I DNF'd this book, yes, I DNF'd it, because I did that, I didn't feel like I got far enough into the book in order to give it any sort of rating, because I believe my problems with the book were mostly personal problems and might not affect everyone, so I did not give it a rating, but if I had to personally give it a 1 star probably. This book had to do with a teenager, I believe he's around 16 years old, who sets off with 2 companions on an adventure crossing over the border from Texas to Mexico. That's all I know. That's all it really said on the synopsis. I didn't get far enough into the book to even really get to that point. I DNF'd it at 41 pages, which for me was being really generous. I was about done with the book 3 to 4 pages into it. I just could not take it anymore. He does not use punctuation, so no apostrophes, no commas, nothing like that, which for me as a reader, personally, my own taste, it was just a lot harder to read. It didn't flow as nicely as I wanted it to. And then coupled with the fact that he used many run-on sentences, I just could not get behind it. It was frustrating and irked me to no end, so I had to DNF this book. I will give you an example of the run-on sentence. I just couldn't do it. For myself personally, I just couldn't do it. All right, here's one example. At the hour he'd always chose when the shadows were long, and the ancient road was shaped before him in the rose, and canted light like a dream of the past where the painted ponies and the riders of the lost nation came down out of the north with their faces chalked, and their long hair plaited, and each armed for war, which was their life, and the women and children, and women with children at their breasts, all of them pledged in blood, and redeemable in blood only. I just couldn't do the ands. It was like and for me, I couldn't do it. It just was really grating on me, so I had to DNF it. I was really excited to read this though, because I've heard great things about his writing, and as you could see, it says National Book Award winner. So I thought this was going to be an amazing story, and maybe it was. Maybe the story itself would have been amazing. Maybe I really would have enjoyed it had I persevered, but I just couldn't mentally. For my own sanity, I could not. Now this makes me sad because I've heard a lot of good things about The Road, and I don't know if all of his books are like this as far as the punctuation and run-on sentences go, but I just personally, for me, could not deal with it, so I will be a little more hesitant when picking up The Road, though I still plan on trying it at least. The first sentence of this book was, "The candle flame and the image of the candle flame caught in the pier glass twisted and righted when he entered the hall, and again when he shut the door." The next book that I read this week was a 3-star read, and that was A Certain Slant of Light by Laura Whitcomb. I enjoyed this book. It was a 3-star read, so for me, 3 stars is enjoyable. It also means it's probably not memorable to me. It's something that I would have read. I enjoyed it at the time, but a few months to a year from now, I'm not even probably going to remember it. This was the story of a girl who was a ghost. She was trapped to a host, so that just rhymed. So whoever she latched onto, she had to stay with that host, and her current host happened to be an English teacher, a high school English teacher. She was in this high school classroom listening to him go on. The students were watching, and she noticed a boy was looking at her. Now, no one else could ever see her, and this was the first time she noticed that this boy could actually, he was actually staring at her. So this went on to progress into finding out who it was, talking, and the story goes on from there. I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to give anything away. But yeah, just not memorable. I will say the writing style itself was quite enjoyable. It was a little bit more mature than regular YA books. You know, the language was a little bit more intricate than YA authors typically use. But I enjoyed it. It was cute. It was a nice story. There was some insta love stuff going on, though I do realize with the type of story that it was, it kind of had to be that way. But overall, enjoyable, but not memorable. And the first line from this book was, "Someone was looking at me, a disturbing sensation if you're dead." The next book that I read was a little bit of a disappointment, and that book was Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I gave this book 3 stars. So yes, it was very enjoyable while I read it, but it is not something that I am going to remember for the story itself. The only reason why I would remember this book is because of the format, because of the case file format. That I thought was very unique. However, I just felt that the general story, the science fiction type story, was somewhat generic. There wasn't really anything that wowed me or made me feel like it deserved more than 3 stars. So I probably will not be picking up the sequel. Sad to say, my daughter has not read this. She's 13 and she has not read it. I don't know if she will, because science fiction really isn't her thing, but maybe at 13 years old, I would have really loved this book. But as an adult reading this book, I just wasn't for me. But I did think that the format was very interesting, and I want to see something like that again, but maybe more of like a psychological thriller, maybe a case file of like a crime that was committed or something like that. I think that would be a little bit more interesting than what this one was. And the first line in this book was, "So here's the file that almost killed me, director." The next book that I read this week was a very enjoyable read, and that was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. I gave this book 4 stars. It's kind of hard with the glare because of the way the book is printed, but I absolutely enjoyed it. It was such a charming, cute, easy to read book. It was just really fun to compare it to the Disney movie that I grew up watching. So I watched the animated version, and I have, as an adult, watched the live action versions probably, well, the first one at least 5 times maybe, and then I saw Through the Looking Glass this year in the theaters just once. But it was interesting to see what they kind of picked out of the story and actually put into the movies, and how they changed it and twisted it a little bit. I really enjoyed that. I think I liked Through the Looking Glass more than Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, but overall, just a fun read. 4 stars. I'm going to read the first line. I'm actually going to read it straight from the book because it is quite long. First line was, "Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversation?" The last book that I read this week was The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I hope I'm saying that correctly. This was a great read. I rated this 4 stars. It was completely engrossing. For the size book that it is, it packs a whole lot of punch into the story. It was a page turner for me, which I was not expecting. It was just the type of story that you just couldn't help yourself. You just kept turning that page and turning that page and turning that page, and I was completely immersed in the story. It is the story of a woman who chooses to become a vegetarian. She does this because she's having these really disturbing dreams about meat and blood, and so she decides she's going to become a vegetarian, and most people around her have a very big problem with that. This story is told from 3 perspectives, the first being her husband, the second being her brother-in-law, and the third being her sister. It is never told from her perspective. You get a few little excerpts from what might be going on in her mind, but you never hear directly from her, which I thought was very interesting. Through this whole book, you're kind of thinking, okay, is this choice of her becoming a vegetarian just her having a belief and sticking to it? Or is this kind of like her descent into madness? I mean, there's so many aspects to the story, so many layers to the story. And like I said, it's very short. It's only 188 pages, but it packs a whole lot of punch. The only things I will say that were maybe negatives, or not even so much, one was it has some mature content. So if you are not into explicit kind of scenes, then maybe this book is not for you. For me, it did not bother me, but I could see where it might be a little off-putting for some people. So that might be a con as far as not being able to reach a wider audience because of that. And the only other con I could say is that I enjoyed each of the perspectives of the narrators, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more from them. But I can understand why it was cut off, when it was cut off, why they showed up, when they showed up, and I really enjoyed this book, and I highly recommend it to anyone who wants just a very quick, engrossing read and something that'll really make you think. The first line to this book was, "Before my wife turned vegetarian, I'd always thought of her as completely unremarkable in every way." So those were all the books that I actually got to finish. I finished them early. I finished them on Thursday evening, probably because I DNF'd all the Pretty Horses. Had I read that, I probably wouldn't have finished that till Friday. But because I finished early, I decided to pick up Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and it is a very big book, very dense book. The first book, when I read it, I believe it took me 4 days. That was also in the very beginning of training when I was trying to cram all this other information into my head. Now that I'm a little bit more into it and starting to feel like work is going smoothly and I don't have to put so much brain power into it, I think I might be able to finish this book in at least 2 days, maybe 3. It is almost 700 pages, so it's a very big book. But I really enjoyed the first one, and I just thought with these couple extra days to start my next week's, reading, that starting this one and reading this one would be a very good decision because it did take me so long the first time. It's very intricate. There's a lot of stuff going on, and her writing is very entailed. I completely enjoy it though. I love her writing, so definitely looking forward to finishing this. I will let you guys know how much I probably loved it next week. The next book that I'm planning on reading this week I thought was fitting since I just finished Alice in Wonderland, and that is The Looking Glass Wars by Frank Bedore. I believe this is a YA novel. It is about a girl, obviously named Alice, and it's more like the true story of Alice in Wonderland, and she gets thrown out of Wonderland and meets Lewis Carroll and entrusts him to record her story and to put it down so everyone knows what is happening to her, and he gets it all wrong, and he even spells her name wrong, and she is lost to Wonderland. So this other character named Hatter Madigan actually is on the search for her to find her and to bring her back to Wonderland and to restore her story to the true nature. So this just sounds like a fun read, and I thought it was fitting since I read Alice to then read this book. It has been sitting on my shelf for a couple of weeks and I really wanted to get to it. So I'm going to read this, and I think I will really enjoy it. At least I'm hoping. The next book that I plan on reading this week is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I have read 2 Neil Gaiman books now. I've read The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was a great book, and I actually was kind of reflecting on that yesterday, thinking, the story has been sticking with me more than I thought it would, so I might raise that 3.75 rating that I gave it to a full 4. I also read, or tried to read, Trigger Warning, which was a collection of short stories, and they just did not click with me, and I ended up not finishing the book. So this will be my 3rd go around with Neil Gaiman, and I've heard a lot of good things about this book, and the synopsis sounds really incredible. It is about a man who is now getting out of prison. His wife Laura. He just wants to get home to his wife Laura, and the day before he's let out, his best friend dies, and now his whole world is kind of thrown again. And he ends up accepting this job from a mysterious man named Mr. Wednesday, and it just sounds like a very engrossing, fast-paced kind of novel. So I'm hoping it is. I will definitely let you guys know what I think. I'm trying to get through all of his books because I really loved The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and I've heard so many good things about his writing. So I'm hoping this book is going to live up to all the hype that I've heard. The next book I'm planning on reading this week is Magic Bites by Alona Andrews. Now, this is a book that I'm doing as a buddy reads with another booktuber named Jill. I think her channel's name is Jill M. She contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in doing an urban fantasy read, and I said sure. I really haven't read any urban fantasy, so this sounds like something that will be a fun time, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. I also wanted to let you guys know I'm open to buddy reads. If anyone else wants to do one, just contact me and we will go about, setting that up. This book is about a girl named Kate Daniels. She is a down-on-her-luck mercenary who makes her living cleaning up magical problems. It says, when Kate's guardian is murdered, her quest for justice draws her into a power struggle between two strong factions within Atlanta's magic circles. Pressured by both sides to find the killer, Kate realizes she's way out of her league and she wouldn't have it any other way. So this just sounds like a fun time. I think this is the first book in a series of books. So if I like this, I will continue on with the series. I will let you guys know what I think next week. The next book I am going to read is actually a book that I had on the top 5 books I'd like to read by the end of the year. I've yet to read any of my other top 5 books, but I saw this one sitting on my shelf and I said, you know what, I need to at least include one, so why not throw it in this week? And that is The Zookeepers Wife by Diane Ackerman. And this is a World War II story about a zookeeper and his wife who actually helped save over 300 people. So it just sounds like a very interesting read, and I am just in the mood for another World War II story this week, so it's right up my alley, and I will let you guys know what I think. So that wraps up all the books that I read last week and the ones that I plan on reading this week. I am really looking forward to reading a lot of them, and I hope you guys have a great week and happy reading.